He gripped the euthanasia form at his dying infant's bedside when a scarred horse burst into the hospital corridor. In that instant, every certainty he had vanished, forcing him to confront a reality beyond reason. It was an unremarkable Tuesday morning at Greenfield County Hospital. The kind of day where nurses bustled from room to room while doctors consulted clipboards with weary determination. The overhead lights hummed softly, reflecting on the polished linoleum floors that stretched down corridors perfumed with disinfectant. No one imagined that, in just a few minutes, an event so extraordinary would unfold that it would leave them questioning everything they thought they knew about hope, miracles, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. In one particular room on the third floor, a frail infant named Lily lay swaddled in a pastel green blanket. Born prematurely with a life-threatening genetic condition, Lily had spent her short existence tangled in tubes and wires, reliant on machines to maintain her unsteady heartbeat. Her condition had deteriorated over the last few weeks, and the doctors, some of the best in the region, exhausted every known treatment. Now, a quiet hush had settled over Lily's room, the final hush that doctors and parents both dread. After much debate and countless tears, the family had agreed to a merciful end to their baby's suffering. In a matter of hours, Lily's life support would be withdrawn. The official paperwork for her euthanasia, though the staff used gentler terms to describe it, had already been signed. Elsewhere in the hospital, a few interns huddled by the nurses' station, sipping coffee and exchanging hushed gossip about the sorrowful case in room 312. Across from them, a middle-aged security guard watched the monitors with half-lidded eyes. He had worked at Greenfield for decades and considered the place familiar, predictable, even dull. But unpredictability would soon be trotting straight through the hospital's front doors. Outside, the January wind swept across the hospital parking lot, rattling the sides of ambulances and sending a chill through the small gathering of smokers who hovered near the entrance. It was here, amid the swirling gusts and the usual morning routine, that something appeared on the horizon, a large shape, dark and graceful, moving at a steady canter. At first, the few bystanders couldn't believe their eyes. A horse, loose and unaccompanied, was galloping directly toward the hospital. The creature's mane whipped in the wind, its eyes wide with unmistakable focus, as if drawn by an urgent summons. Nurses on break blinked in disbelief. An orderly, halfway through a cigarette, dropped it on the asphalt in shock. Others pointed, shouted, or simply stood frozen. But the horse didn't slow. One nurse instinctively reached out a hand, unsure of what she intended to do, but the horse veered gracefully around her and kept going. It startled the automatic doors into opening, breezing right into the lobby with a strange, purposeful calm, as though it knew exactly where it was headed. Pandemonium ensued. The waiting area erupted with gasps and squeals. Patients clutched their chairs or hobbled behind counters for cover, half expecting the horse to thrash and kick. Instead, the animal moved with an odd gentleness, navigating the seats and scattered tables without knocking anything over. A volunteer stationed at the information desk tried to step in front of the dark bay stallion, but the horse maneuvered around him and continued toward the elevators. Onlookers whispered questions in trembling voices. Who did this horse belong to? Was it dangerous? And how in the world had it decided that a hospital lobby was where it needed to be? Upstairs, Lily's parents cradled their heads in despair, preparing themselves for the unimaginable. A doctor entered quietly with instructions for the procedure. Sniffling, Lily's mother placed a tender kiss on her daughter's forehead, tears carving silent tracks down her cheeks. Lily's father stood beside them, his eyes red and vacant, the weight of heartbreak pressing the air out of his lungs. Their family priest hovered just behind, offering supportive words between shaky breaths of his own. Though no one dared to voice it, every soul in that room was asking the same question: was there no hope left? Down the hall, the elevator doors slid open with a hushed chime. A startled nurse let out a yelp when she saw the stallion stepping calmly into the corridor. The overhead fluorescence reflected off his coat, revealing a pattern of what looked like old scars across his muscular flanks. Perhaps the marks of a troubled past or a life once lived under harsh conditions. Several staff members tried to barricade the hallway with a crash cart, but the horse simply sidestepped their efforts. His eyes were locked forward, as though something beyond the walls was calling to him. In disbelief, the onlookers followed, forming a cautious circle around the animal as he proceeded. Someone tried to radio security, but the guard downstairs was too flustered to respond coherently. Another nurse attempted to dial for help, only to find that no one could offer immediate assistance for such an unusual situation. The meltdown in communications only added to the surreal atmosphere. A horse in a hospital, on a mission that no one but the horse itself could understand. Step by step, the stallion made his way toward room 312. His nostrils flared at the medley of sharp hospital smells: antiseptic, medication, the subtle but distinct sense of anxiety and sorrow. Each time a startled doctor or nurse tried to intercept him, the stallion paused, regarded them with an almost human intelligence, and then resumed his path, as though he knew time was of the essence. Finally, outside the door to Lily's room, a cluster of staff formed a tense blockade. Lily's father peeked out, alarmed by the commotion in the hallway. "What on earth?" he murmured, stepping forward to see a large horse breathing heavily as it confronted half a dozen people in white coats. The father blinked rapidly, as if convinced he was hallucinating from stress. But this was no hallucination. The horse was as real as the heartbreak coursing through that corridor. Before anyone could formulate a plan, the stallion let out a gentle whinny, a sound that resonated with an unspoken plea. Something about that soft, urgent call made those around him hesitate. Then, in a moment that defied all reason, Lily's mother emerged from the room, tears streaming down her face. She looked at the horse, truly looked, and in its dark eyes saw neither danger nor chaos, but an impossible empathy. The horse, as if responding to her silent invitation, took a single step forward and gently lowered its head in her direction. The hush that followed was immense, broken only by the mechanical hiss of a ventilator inside the room. It was as if the entire hospital floor held its breath. Medical staff stared in fascination and confusion. One of the doctors, a woman with decades of pediatric experience, found tears rolling down her cheeks unbidden. She couldn't fathom why she was crying, but there was an overwhelming sense that this animal had come for a reason. With trembling hands, Lily's mother reached out to the horse. His muzzle pressed softly against her palm. She felt the warmth of his breath, the steady beat of a life unfazed by the cold sterility of the hospital. In that small gesture, Lily's mother felt something shift within her, a tenuous thread of hope she thought had snapped forever. Lily's father joined her side, uncertain but drawn by the quiet gravity of the moment. The horse lifted its head and seemed to lock eyes with him too. The father, who had braced himself for unimaginable sorrow, felt an equally unfathomable question stir in his mind. Could there still be a chance for Lily? As if on cue, a flurry of urgent voices erupted from inside room 312. A beeping alarm began to shrill. The doctors rushed back into the room, Lily's mother and father following close behind. The horse, uninvited but undeterred, tried to enter. A nurse reflexively moved to stop him, only to freeze when Lily's mother pleaded, "Let him in." The staff exchanged frantic glances. Nothing about this scenario complied with hospital protocol, but in the face of heartbreak and a moment that felt almost spiritual, rules seemed to melt away. With caution, they allowed the stallion a step inside the doorway. He stood there, nostrils quivering, as Lily's small chest struggled under a tangle of tubes. The beep that had startled everyone was the ventilator alarm, indicating a sudden change in the baby's breathing pattern. The lead pediatrician examined the monitor. His expression changed from alarm to stunned bewilderment. Lily's oxygen levels had spiked, no, soared, and her heart rate, once terrifyingly erratic, had steadied as if by some unseen force. Nurses frantically checked the connections, certain there must be a malfunction, but every line, every reading seemed correct. "How is this possible?" one of the doctors whispered. No one had a rational explanation. All eyes turned to the baby's parents, who clung to each other, hearts racing with cautious wonder. But Lily's mother looked past them, past the machines and the staff, and focused on the stallion. He stood calmly at the threshold, ears flicking as though listening to a song no one else could hear. In his eyes was a steadfast assurance, a silent vow that he would hold vigil for as long as it took. A collective hush fell over the room yet again. This time, it wasn't fear or sorrow that stilled their tongues, but awe. The horse had, in a manner beyond comprehension, stopped the doctor's final decision. The euthanasia, considered the only merciful option just moments before, was abruptly placed on hold. Lily's numbers, though fragile, were improving right before their eyes. Medical science couldn't explain it, and no one dared utter the word miracle for fear it might vanish if named. But the staff who witnessed it, the parents who tasted hope again, and the silent, steadfast stallion all understood that something extraordinary had just transpired. "How is she doing this?" asked one of the younger nurses, voice trembling with excitement. "She was declining so fast." The lead pediatrician shook his head in a silent reply. He could recount decades of medical knowledge, but none of it explained why Lily seemed to be pulling back from the brink. "Run more tests," he finally managed, regaining his composure. "We need to see what's really happening here." Without waiting, the nurses and attending physicians sprang into action, verifying vitals, adjusting the baby's position, and preparing new scans. The father sank into a chair, overwhelmed by relief so intense it nearly stole his strength. Lily's mother stood near the horse, tears pouring down her cheeks as she reached out to stroke its neck in gratitude. And the horse, as if content with this development, exhaled a long, steady breath that echoed through the charged silence of the hospital room. In the hallway outside, rumors spread like wildfire. Word of a mysterious horse that had somehow changed the fate of a dying infant stirred staff and patients alike to come see for themselves. Some whispered about divine intervention. Others pointed to improbable coincidences. Yet others simply watched with damp eyes, uncertain but hopeful that they were witnessing something the world so desperately needed. A reason to believe in the impossible. No one knew what would happen next. Would Lily's sudden improvement last? And who, if anyone, could claim to understand how a solitary horse had found its way to the third floor of a hospital into a restricted pediatric unit just in time to halt an irreversible decision? The building pulsed with questions that had no easy answers, but for the moment, in that small, softly lit room, the air felt lighter. Lily's chest rose and fell with new vigor. Her mother and father held onto each other, hearts pounding with cautious elation. And the stallion, silent witness to an event few would ever forget, stood guard by the door, as though he had been sent there for this single, breathtaking purpose. Tension coated the halls like a fine layer of dust, an uneasy stillness that followed in the wake of something no one could explain. Once Lily's vital signs had settled into a more stable rhythm, the doctors turned from awestruck to methodical. ordering scans and blood work to verify this astonishing turn. While the hustle of medical procedures resumed, the horse remained a silent sentinel, standing near the threshold of room 312, as if oblivious to the stares and whispers swirling around him. In truth, no one quite knew what to do next. Protocol did not cover the presence of a large animal in a pediatric ward, yet no one wanted to be the first to force it away. Something told them the horse would not budge until he'd completed whatever purpose had brought him here. A bewildered security team was the first official response. Approaching with caution, they tried to coax the stallion into leaving, motioning toward the elevator. They spoke in low voices, half expecting the horse to charge at them. Instead, he stood calmly, his ears flicking back only when they waved their arms too close to his face. When a guard reached out to seize his bridle, an improvised length of gauze that a quick-thinking nurse had fashioned to keep him from wandering off, the stallion let out a soft snort and shifted sideways, more irritated than afraid. Deciding it was best not to provoke him, the guards backed off. One guard pressed a radio to his lips and muttered something about calling animal control, but an onlooking nurse simply shook her head and said, "Not yet. Let's see what the doctors decide." Meanwhile, Lily's mother was fighting a whole new set of tears in the corner of room 312. Just moments ago, she had been bracing herself for the hardest farewell any parent could face. Now, Lily's chest rose and fell with a steadier rhythm than it had shown in weeks. Her oxygen saturation levels had climbed into a range that verged on the miraculous. The mother brushed trembling fingers across her baby's cheek. Though Lily's eyelids remained closed, a slight flush of color had returned to her once pallid face. The father hovered near the foot of the bed, glancing at the monitors with an expression that danced between joy and confusion. A young resident rushed in, brandishing the latest test results. He barely noticed the horse's muzzle poking through the doorway in his excitement. "Her blood gases," he began breathlessly. "They're better than they've been since she was transferred here." The resident's cheeks glowed with wonder. Lily's mother clasped her hands together, her heart buoyed by the first real hope she had felt since her baby was born. Yet amid her gratitude, she could not shake the thought that none of this made sense in any medical context she had ever known. Behind the resident, the supervising physician entered, an older man with silver hair, shaped by countless nights of worry over the fragile lives in his charge. He studied Lily's chart, lips pursed in disbelief. "We'll keep monitoring her," he said slowly. "Whatever caused this improvement, I'm not about to question it. Let's make sure we do everything possible to help it continue." He paused to exchange a meaningful look with the mother and father, then cleared his throat. "I suppose we can hold off on that final decision for now." The baby's parents stared at him, tears welling anew. For the first time since Lily's condition had become dire, they sensed genuine optimism in the room. It was as though a dark veil had lifted, allowing them to glimpse a tomorrow they never thought they would see. With shaky gratitude, they nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. The father turned back toward the doorway, where the mysterious horse was still stationed. He didn't voice the wild notion forming in his mind that the stallion's uncanny timing might be more than coincidence. He simply stared, a silent vow of thanks in his eyes. Word spread like ripples in a pond. Within the hour, a smattering of reporters began assembling outside the hospital, alerted by social media posts from staff and visitors who had witnessed the peculiar arrival. Standing behind yellow police tape, local journalists chattered among themselves. Inside, the hospital's administration convened an impromptu crisis meeting to discuss the bizarre situation. One official wanted the horse removed immediately, citing liability and safety hazards. Another worried about the backlash if forcibly removing him might somehow harm Lily's family. After all, their baby's life had taken a sudden turn for the better in the horse's presence. The debate lasted only a few minutes, but in that time, nurses whispered of miracles and some recalled legends of animals that seemed to possess healing gifts. Eventually, the hospital's chief of staff arrived on the third floor, flanked by 2 administrators and a veterinarian from a nearby clinic. The veterinarian, Dr. Holder, approached with professional caution, scanning the horse for signs of stress or injury. "He seems healthy," she murmured, stepping lightly around him as she examined his flank. He wore no saddle and no shoes. A rough halter had been slipped on him only moments before. Judging from his musculature and scars, Dr. Holder suspected he might be a stray or a rescue that had somehow escaped a nearby farm. Yet nothing could explain how he had navigated the corridors so confidently. Despite her clinical demeanor, Dr. Holder could not stop a small shiver from coursing through her as she peered into the stallion's eyes. There was an uncanny calm in them, the kind that seemed to say he understood precisely where he was and why. That notion, of course, was preposterous, but she could not shake it. While the adults conferred, a small group of children from the pediatric wing peeked around a corner. They had heard the rumors. A real horse had come upstairs, right past the place where wheelchairs and bandages lived. This was more wondrous than any storybook. One little boy, bandaged from recent surgery, giggled as the horse's tail flicked. Another child, who had been drifting in and out of a post-chemotherapy haze all morning, smiled for the first time in days. Their nurse whispered that they should keep back, but the excitement in their eyes was irrepressible. Meanwhile, Lily's father found himself drawn out of the room, partly to escape the swirl of nurses adjusting his daughter's tubes, partly driven by a desire to thank the horse. Though he felt slightly ridiculous, he approached the stallion with a shy reverence, as one might approach a sacred relic. The father extended a cautious hand toward that long, dark muzzle, his pulse thrumming. The stallion nudged his palm gently. Tears pooled in the man's eyes as he murmured, "I don't know where you came from, but thank you." Several staff members looked on with parted lips. "Doctor." Holder cleared her throat and said, "Well, we should see if we can guide him outside. He'll need proper care if he's going to stay around." Her voice trembled with an unusual mix of professionalism and wonder. In any other situation, they might have sedated or tranquilized a large animal found wandering in a hospital hallway. But after what they had witnessed, sedation seemed almost profane, an affront to the intangible power the horse exuded. One of the administrators nodded, turning to Lily's father. "Would you be willing to help lead him? He seems to respond to you." The father glanced at the stallion, uncertain. He wasn't a horse trainer or even particularly familiar with animals. Still, something about the way the stallion met his gaze stirred a quiet confidence. Without waiting for further guidance, he nodded and carefully took hold of the makeshift halter. The stallion did not resist. Instead, he lowered his head as though granting permission. Slowly, they began moving down the hallway. People pressed themselves against walls to watch, some capturing pictures on their phones while others simply stared. When they reached the elevator, however, the stallion hesitated. The father froze, worried that the horse might panic in the cramped space. Everyone else looked on anxiously. But the stallion took a tentative step inside, ears pinned forward in caution, then another. Once the doors slid shut, an odd hush enveloped them. Father, horse, and Dr. Holder, accompanied by a single security guard who hovered near the control panel. The ride down felt surreal, as though time had paused. The father stole a glance at Dr. Holder, who was stroking the horse's neck with light, reassuring pats. The guard cleared his throat, a single awkward sound in the tight space. You think this is a miracle?" he asked softly, uncertain whether he was crossing a line. Dr. Holder didn't answer. She just stroked the horse, caught in her own reverie. When the elevator doors parted on the ground floor, they emerged to a crowd of onlookers, hospital staff, anxious reporters, curious strangers who had wandered in. As cameras flashed, the father shielded his eyes, then shielded the horse with his body, feeling oddly protective. The stallion blinked and snorted softly, neither frightened nor aggressive, just watchful. Moments later, an older woman in a wheelchair burst into grateful tears at the sight of him, crying out that she had prayed for miracles and now believed anything was possible. Police officers had cordoned off an area near the entrance, ready to load the horse into a borrowed trailer or something similar. Yet when the father tried to lead him in that direction, the stallion shook his head and refused to move. Suddenly, he reared, just slightly, enough to make the father step back. He didn't strike out or kick, but his message was clear. He would not be forced into a vehicle. Murmurs swept through the crowd, cameras clicked. The father shot a distressed look at Dr. Holder, unsure how to proceed. Then, in a gesture that seemed almost comically respectful, the stallion dropped his head again and took a step toward the hospital doors. He glanced back at Lily's father as though to say, "Follow me if you trust me." The father, heart pounding, let the horse take the lead. Step by step, they walked outside, the morning sun casting a bright glare across the parking lot. By now, a crowd had gathered. Patients in robes, interns in scrubs, journalists adjusting microphones. A soft breeze carried the smell of antiseptic and car exhaust, a strangely contradictory mix. For a moment, everyone watched, waiting for something else incredible to happen. Yet the stallion simply stood there in the crisp air, scanning the horizon. He exhaled a long breath that sounded almost like relief. After a final glance at the man who'd been guiding him, the stallion trotted away. Not a furious gallop, not a frantic escape, just a smooth, purposeful trot, as though his duty was done. The father and Dr. Holder stood rooted in place, the halter and rope trailing uselessly in their hands. In the hush that followed, it felt like a dream had lifted. Some staff members stared at the place where the horse had disappeared, half expecting him to circle back. Police officers looked perplexed, as if they'd lost their role in this odd, uncharted play. The father realized his cheeks were wet with tears he hadn't felt falling. Behind him, muffled cheers erupted from the hospital lobby. A pair of medical students, apparently just told that Lily's condition was improving further. It all happened so swiftly that no one managed to block the stallion or corner him. He crossed the parking lot, leaped a small barrier, and was gone. Far in the distance, a dark shape flickered once before fading from sight. The hush that settled over the hospital's front entrance lingered long after the stallion vanished. Lily's father stood there, cradling the makeshift halter in his hands, the wind tugging gently at his shirt sleeves. Dr. Holder, the veterinarian, remained at his side, gaze fixed on the distant tree line where the horse had last been seen. Though the morning sun was bright, a faint chill seemed to ripple through everyone who'd borne witness to the unexplained. For a long, breathless moment, nobody spoke. Then the reporters came. Microphones and cameras thrust forward, voices colliding in a storm of urgent questions. Sir, do you believe this horse saved your daughter?" one shouted. Another demanded, "Is this some form of miracle?" The father managed only a few halting replies before nurses stepped in to disperse the crowd. Feeling overwhelmed, he mumbled an apology and slipped back inside, still gripping that strip of gauze as though it were a lifeline. Upstairs, the mood in room 312 was equally charged. Lily's mother hovered over the bassinet, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. Lily's once labored breathing had evened out, and although her tiny body remained attached to an array of tubes, the monitors showed stable oxygen levels, a night and day difference from the brink of tragedy just hours earlier. A cluster of doctors and residents surrounded her bed, double-checking the data and whispering to each other in hushed, reverent tones. The mother noticed one of them. The silver-haired physician lifted the edge of his glasses to surreptitiously wipe his eyes. At the nurse's station, a charge nurse tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. "We've got to keep the floor running," she reminded her staff, handing out assignments for the day. But the excitement was hard to quell. Orderlies and interns exchanged snippets of gossip, heads nodding toward the stairwell as they recounted every detail of the horse's improbable journey through their sterile halls. When Lily's father returned to the ward, he saw the swirl of activity outside his daughter's room. He felt an urgent tug to be by her side, to confirm again that her miraculous improvement was real. Yet as he eased past a cluster of staff, he couldn't resist glancing out the window at the parking lot below, where news vans still gathered. The father couldn't stop wondering about the horse, why it had come, why it had vanished, and whether it might return. Deep in the back of his mind, a new question formed. Had that horse truly changed Lily's fate? He slipped into room 312, relieved to find Lily's mother awake and calmer, though tears still clung to her lashes. At their infant's bedside stood the silver-haired doctor, who was murmuring instructions to a nurse. He paused when the father entered. "Her condition remains guarded," he said gently. "But it's nothing short of remarkable that she's stabilized to this degree." A hint of a wry smile curved his lips. "Sometimes the body just needs a reason to fight." The father's breath caught in his throat. He brushed a tender hand over Lily's swaddled form and felt his heart flutter at the faint warmth in her cheeks. Moments later, the mother took hold of his free hand, fingers trembling as she intertwined them with his. A bittersweet current of relief pulsed between them. While their baby's prognosis was far from certain, a fresh wind of possibility now filled the room, scattering the suffocating dread that had weighed on them for so long. Meanwhile, in the hospital's administrative wing, a different conversation was taking place. Behind closed doors, the chief of staff sat at a polished table with legal counsel and senior department heads. They debated the ramifications of the horse's appearance. One administrator insisted that the hospital might face liability issues. Another worried about staff morale if they acted too forcefully in dismissing the incident. A representative from public relations believed the story, if handled carefully, could actually bolster the hospital's image as a place of compassion and extraordinary care. At length, they agreed on a neutral statement acknowledging an unorthodox occurrence under investigation, while underscoring that patient welfare remained the priority. As soon as this was drafted, an assistant rushed downstairs to read it to the small army of reporters gathered outside. Cameras flashed as an impromptu press conference commenced on the hospital's main steps. Journalists peppered the assistant with questions. Was it true the horse had come from nowhere? Were there security lapses? Was Lily's recovery genuine or exaggerated? The assistant stuck dutifully to the script, then beat a hasty retreat before the next barrage began. All the while, Dr. Holder found herself wandering the grounds around Greenfield County Hospital, scanning the parking lot, the distant fields, and the skyline. Though she was unsure what she'd do if she found the horse, she couldn't simply let the matter rest. That animal's calm presence and the timing of Lily's resurgence felt like more than happenstance. She tried calling local stables, leaving messages with other veterinarians and even the nearby animal shelter. No one reported a missing horse matching the description. It was as if he had materialized out of thin air. At lunchtime, the cafeteria buzzed with speculation. Staff who had been off duty that morning pressed their colleagues for details, astonished to hear about a stallion traipsing past the pediatric ward. Some jokes were made about Mr. Ed goes to the hospital, but most nurses quickly shushed them, unsettled by how serious and real it had felt. An older janitor quietly confided he had grown up hearing stories of a phantom horse rumored to appear in dire moments. Though he admitted that was a legend told by his grandmother, few paid him any mind, but his words wove themselves into the tapestry of rumors already swirling. Upstairs, Lily slept peacefully for the first time in her short life, without the mechanical agitation of alarms and forced ventilation. Doctors reduced certain medications, testing whether she could maintain stable vitals on her own. Hour after hour, her little lungs continued to function more robustly than anyone dared hope. The improvement was fragile but undeniable. The father and mother alternated between tearful embraces and hushed excitement, their hands clasped tightly on the bed rail. Nurses entered in small clusters to check Lily's stats, each leaving the room with watery smiles. Late in the afternoon, Dr. Holder reappeared at the pediatric ward with a discouraged sigh. She had spent hours driving around farmland on the outskirts of town, peeking into meadows and scanning fences, but saw no sign of the stallion. Local farmers had reported nothing unusual, and not a single hoofprint in the half-frozen ground suggested his path. The father, who had just stepped out to grab a vending machine coffee, met Dr. Holder in the corridor. She shook her head, lips set in a puzzled line. "No luck," she admitted. "It's as if he just dissolved into thin air. But if he really was a stray, he can't go on indefinitely without food or shelter." The father nodded, feeling an odd pang of sadness at the horse's disappearance. He couldn't pinpoint why it mattered so much, perhaps gratitude or a yearning to complete a circle of grace. If the stallion had truly helped Lily, it felt important to honor him somehow. Dr. Holder placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder before heading off to speak with the hospital's administrative staff again, hoping for leads. That evening brought with it a quiet hush, a calm that felt almost sacred. The persistent beeping of Lily's monitors was replaced with gentler tones, indicating that her breathing and heart rate were, against all odds, holding steady. Hospital policy dictated that the parents take turns resting, but neither wanted to leave Lily's side for longer than a few minutes. Something incredible had happened, and they worried that if they let themselves wander too far, they might wake from the dream. Even the staff seemed subdued, tiptoeing in and out with reverence. Meanwhile, a local news channel led its broadcast with a dramatic headline, "Horse Storms Hospital, Medical Miracle or Coincidence." Grainy footage from a witness's cell phone showed the stallion in the hallway, head high, eyes focused forward. The anchor recounted how an infant's health had unexpectedly improved just as the horse appeared. Experts weighed in, with a handful of veterinarians and medical professionals offering cautious opinions. Most simply shrugged at the coincidence, but a few voiced the possibility that animals sometimes spur incredible emotional responses in humans, and that positive emotional energy could, in rare cases, influence health. Viewers were left with more questions than answers. That night, the father stood in the window of Lily's room, cradling a cup of watery coffee. The city lights glimmered in the distance. Behind him, the gentle hum of the machines and the mother's soft breathing served as a lullaby of relief. Lily was still stable. The father's heart felt full to bursting, equal parts gratitude, awe, and exhaustion. Through the glass, he imagined shapes in the darkness, perhaps a silhouette of a horse, still pacing somewhere beyond. But no figure emerged, only the swirl of a winter wind rustling the bare branches. Tomorrow, there would be more tests, more interviews, more attempts to understand the unexplainable. But for now, the father whispered a silent prayer into that darkened sky, unsure to whom or what he prayed, only that he felt compelled to give thanks. He then turned back to Lily, who slept quietly under soft fluorescent light, her tiny form almost lost in blankets and tubes. Kneeling beside her, he lowered his head and set down his coffee. His fingers brushed the top of Lily's wispy hair, and he closed his eyes, brimming with a sense of wonder he had never known before. As he rose, he caught sight of the gauze halter draped over a chair. It looked so small now, a fragile piece of cloth that had nonetheless played a pivotal role in what felt like a miracle. The father gently folded it and placed it beside Lily's bed, deciding it should stay there as a testament, a reminder that sometimes hope arrives in the most unthinkable forms. With a final glance at his daughter's even breathing, he flicked off the overhead light so only the monitors glowed, keeping watch through the night. Morning light filtered through thin curtains, illuminating the row of blinking machines arranged around Lily's bed. After a night of rest, Lily's father stirred from the upright chair where he'd dozed off. His back ached, but he felt an immense gratitude that overshadowed any discomfort. He blinked away the residue of sleep and leaned forward, relief cascading through him at the sound of Lily's soft, steady breathing. The mother, who had finally curled up on a cramped couch sometime after midnight, stirred as well. When she sat up, their eyes met, and a tremulous smile passed between them. Two nurses entered quietly, scanning Lily's monitors. One adjusted an IV line, then paused to grin at the mother. "Her numbers remain stable," the nurse murmured, voice hushed as though afraid to jinx the fragile blessing. "We're hopeful we can begin weaning her off the ventilator soon." Hearing it said aloud made Lily's mother clasp her hands together, tears once again brimming. The father stood and crossed to her side, gently pressing a hand to her shoulder in silent comfort. Word had spread that the hospital's top neonatal specialist, Dr. Alam, would be coming by for a personal assessment. He was a renowned figure, often traveling to teach advanced techniques in major cities. The fact that he'd cleared his schedule to see Lily underscored how remarkable her turnaround seemed. Sure enough, at 8 o'clock sharp, Dr. Alam swept into the room, his footsteps brisk. He was a tall man in his late 50s, with carefully trimmed salt and pepper hair. Without preamble, he examined Lily's vitals and asked detailed questions of the attending physicians. When he finished, he turned to the parents, speaking in a measured tone that conveyed both empathy and expertise. "Your daughter is defying expectations," he said, his warm eyes flicking to Lily's tiny frame. "If she continues on this track, we might be discussing a long-term recovery plan rather than palliative measures." The father couldn't believe what he was hearing. "So she could make it," he whispered, almost unable to form the words. A gentle nod from Dr. Alam caused the mother to choke back a sob. Dr. Alam cautioned them that Lily's condition remained delicate, that infections or setbacks could still occur, but his overall outlook was positive. Relief, tinged with disbelief, spread through the room like a cleansing breeze. Outside, news vans still lingered at the hospital's entrance. Overnight, interest in the mysterious horse had ballooned. Local stations ran continuous loops of the shaky cell phone video, and even a national outlet had mentioned the story briefly. Some people championed the horse as a sign of divine grace. Others dismissed it as a random event seized upon by desperate people in search of hope. Online, debates raged in comment threads. Yet for Lily's parents, what truly mattered was that their child was still alive, and that every passing hour offered a brighter horizon. Around midday, the father stepped into the hall, needing a moment to breathe and gather himself. A nurse had kindly dropped off extra clothes donated by a local charity for parents in crisis, so he'd changed into a fresh t-shirt and sweatpants. Even that small gesture of normalcy felt surreal. Just a day ago, he thought he might have to leave the hospital grieving. Now, he navigated a maze of medical staff and well-wishers, each wanting an update on Lily's progress. He eventually found Dr. Holder leaning against a windowsill at the end of the corridor, sipping from a disposable coffee cup. She had circles under her eyes, as though she hadn't slept. When she noticed him, her gaze softened. "How's Lily?" she asked gently. "She's doing well, beyond anything we expected." The father ran a hand through his hair. "Thank you for trying to locate that horse. I can't explain it, but I feel like I owe him everything." "Doctor?" Holder managed a small smile. "I haven't given up yet. I put out more notices to the local shelters. I'm coordinating with law enforcement too, though they're baffled. No missing livestock reports match the description." She paused, glancing at the father's worn face. "I know it's not your top priority, but if I ever do find him, would you want to see him again?" A rush of feeling flared in his chest. "Absolutely," he replied, the conviction in his voice clear. "I need to know. I need to understand why he came here, or at least thank him." Dr. Holder nodded, her own curiosity mirroring his. They spoke a moment longer about logistical details. Then she excused herself to make more calls. Back in Lily's room, the mother was carefully running a hand over Lily's delicate arms, humming a lullaby under her breath. The baby's eyelids fluttered, as if sensing the gentlest ripple of that tune. Nurses bustled in and out, and once Lily's father returned, a nurse informed them that Dr. Allam planned to hold a formal consult at 3 o'clock after reviewing additional scans. The mother squeezed her husband's hand. Even though Lily was far from out of the woods, the possibility of genuine recovery felt like a dream they both feared would dissolve if tested too thoroughly. The hours leading up to that consult stretched out, a strange blend of tension and quiet hope. The mother dozed intermittently. The father found himself pacing the hallway again, acknowledging passing staff with faint nods. He ended up in a small waiting lounge near the pediatric ward. On the television screen mounted in the corner, the midday news was running a recap of the horse story. The footage cut to an interview with an older gentleman who claimed to have seen a mysterious creature galloping near the edge of town. The father watched in silence until a nurse gently tapped him on the arm and said the doctors were ready. He hurried back to Lily's room, where Dr. Allam stood with the silver-haired pediatrician and 2 residents. They displayed the latest X-rays and scans on a digital screen, pointing out improvements in Lily's lung function. While the changes were small, they were statistically significant. Dr. Allam's tone reflected tempered optimism. Lily would need continued support, but if her system kept responding, she might be taken off certain life-sustaining machines in the coming weeks. Lily's parents exchanged a watery smile of relief. It felt surreal to imagine going from planning a funeral to envisioning a future, but each day was a test, and they both recognized that the hospital bed, the tubes, and the uncertain flicker of life in their child's chest still demanded patience. Nonetheless, Dr. Allam's hopeful words echoed in their hearts, buoying them with cautious anticipation. After the consult, the mother stepped outside for a breath of fresh air while the father stayed behind, softly stroking Lily's hair. Wandering through the corridor and descending via a back stairwell, she eventually emerged near a side entrance of the hospital. The winter sun glared off parked cars, and she shielded her eyes, inhaling crisp air that smelled faintly of melting snow and car exhaust. A small group of reporters still lingered, hoping for any update on Lily or the mysterious stallion. Spotting her, one woman rushed forward, microphone ready. "Ma'am, could you tell us how your daughter is doing?" The mother normally avoided these confrontations, but something in the reporter's earnest tone made her pause. She took a breath, tears already pressing at the corners of her eyes. "My daughter's alive," she said softly. "She's improving. We don't know why or how, but we're grateful." That was all she could manage. The reporter leaned in with another question, but the mother stepped back, offering a polite shake of her head before turning away. Inside the hospital lobby, the mother halted by a broad window. A pigeon flapped at the sill, scattering dust motes. She couldn't help but remember the sight of that horse trotting away, its mane rippling in the winter air. The mother's mind danced with questions she had never before considered. Could an animal sense human need? Could that stallion have been drawn by Lily's despair or by some intangible call? Rationally, she knew these thoughts bordered on fantasy. Yet Lily's dramatic turnaround defied simple explanations. She closed her eyes, exhaling a shaky breath. As evening settled again, the hospital staff began to rotate shifts. New nurses introduced themselves, scanning Lily's chart with wide-eyed amazement. Some whispered that Lily's story had become an emblem of hope throughout the entire building, with parents of other sick children clinging to the idea that miracles might still occur. The mother tried not to assume Lily's improvement was permanent. She'd seen the roller coaster of neonatal care before, patients who improved one day only to deteriorate the next. But a glimmer of faith continued to glow in her heart. That night, security measures tightened around the pediatric ward. Officials worried about curious strangers sneaking upstairs, eager to exploit the sensational story. While no direct threats had been made, administrators wanted to ensure Lily's privacy. 2 security guards posted themselves discreetly at the corridor's entrance, ready to turn away unauthorized visitors or prying reporters. In Lily's room, the mother and father remained with their daughter, settling in for another vigil. Midway through the night, Lily's father ventured to the hallway for a cup of coffee from the machine. He passed a window that overlooked the dark grounds below. A motion sensor floodlight blinked on, illuminating a stretch of lawn. For an irrational second, he thought he saw movement, a flash of something large near the hedges. His pulse kicked, and he pressed closer to the glass, heart thudding, but it was only a breeze stirring the bushes. Feeling foolish, he carried on, retrieving his coffee in silence. Back in room 312, Lily slept while her machines hummed with a rhythmic hush. He returned to find the mother gently touching Lily's forehead, listening to the whisper of air in the tubes. "She's so peaceful," she murmured, voice choked. The father nodded, setting down the coffee and gathering his wife into an embrace. In that quiet moment, their gratitude and exhaustion mingled into a hush that the machines could not intrude upon. They stayed like that for a long while, arms wrapped around each other, eyes on their little girl. Outside, the hospital settled into its nocturnal routine of soft footsteps and subdued voices. Beneath it all, one question remained unspoken. Would the horse come back, or was his presence a single, unrepeatable gift? Neither knew the answer, but the wonder of his arrival and Lily's sudden surge toward life had already rewritten the shape of their hearts. The next morning arrived with a hush of subdued excitement on Lily's floor. Though her condition had been stable for over a day now, none of the doctors wanted to jinx it by labeling her recovery certain. Instead, they used words like cautious optimism and re-evaluation to describe the path ahead. Still, Lily's parents, who had endured the longest nights of their lives, felt their hearts swell with each hour that passed. Every beep of the monitors struck them less like a warning and more like a gentle lullaby, guiding their daughter forward. Dr. Allam returned at dawn, scanning Lily's charts with the diligence of someone searching for hidden clues. He listened to her heartbeat through a stethoscope, nodding when he detected a steady rhythm. "If her labs come back clean today," he told the mother and father, "we'll talk about reducing ventilator support tomorrow." Small steps, but significant. The mother clutched the father's hand, barely trusting herself to hope. She remembered the nurses removing the isolation curtains earlier, as if physically manifesting the notion that Lily was no longer on the brink. The father caught her glance and squeezed her fingers, wordlessly acknowledging how much they had been through. Downstairs, in a small corner office, Dr. Holder sat at a borrowed desk, covered in printouts. She had spent the early hours reviewing everything from equine rescue registries to social media sightings. Her eyes felt gritty, and a wisp of hair had escaped her ponytail to dangle irritably against her cheek. Stifling a yawn, she dialed another number on the list. A stable manager answered, her voice crackling over a poor connection. "Doctor." Holder launched into her well-rehearsed spiel, a large, dark stallion with old scars, no shoes, and an unshakable calm. The manager apologized, but said they had no knowledge of such a horse. With a polite thank you, Dr. Holder hung up, marking yet another dead end in red pen. Her phone buzzed with a text from a colleague at the local animal shelter. "No new leads," it read. "Doctor." Holder sighed. She couldn't recall being so fixated on a single missing animal, but something about this situation felt bigger than logic. She refused to let the horse disappear into legend without at least trying to find the truth. Upstairs, Lily's father strolled the corridor, bracing himself for the day's swirl of attention. He noticed a woman standing near the door to Lily's room, nervously twisting her hands. She looked to be in her late 20s, wearing a rumpled cardigan, eyes red as though from crying. When she spotted him, she stepped forward awkwardly. "I'm sorry to bother you," she began, voice trembling. "My little boy. He's sick. I heard about what happened with your daughter," and she paused, floundering for words. "I guess I just wanted to know if the horse might come back. Or if there's a chance my son could benefit somehow." Her plea turned the father's heart inside out. Though he understood the desperation that came from witnessing a miracle, he had no answers. He gently placed a hand on the woman's shoulder, careful not to overpromise. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I don't know where the horse is. We're as mystified as everyone else." A flicker of disappointment crossed her face, and she nodded through tears. She offered a shaky thanks, then slipped down the hallway, leaving the father behind with a heavy sense of helplessness. He stood there a while, recalling how life had felt utterly hopeless just days before. Now, he stood on the other side, cautiously triumphant, but aware that others still endured their own moments of despair. An older nurse found him and guided him gently back to Lily's room, reminding him that the best place for him was by his daughter's side. That afternoon, Lily underwent another round of tests. Scans of her lungs revealed small but tangible improvements, and Dr. Alam reiterated that they might soon taper off her ventilator. The mother openly wept with relief, pressing her forehead to Lily's. The father excused himself to the hallway for a moment, letting the wave of emotion subside. He leaned against the wall, chest tight with gratitude and exhaustion. Another nurse passed by, giving him a supportive pat on the arm. Meanwhile, Dr. Holder met with the hospital's security chief, trying to glean any overlooked detail in the surveillance footage. They rewatched the bizarre clip of the horse stepping off an elevator, staff trailing behind, then continuing to room 312. The camera angle didn't capture enough to show exactly how he navigated the corridors. What it did show, though, was the moment when the horse slowed outside Lily's room. He stood stock still for a beat or two, nostrils flaring as if drawn by an unseen force. Dr. Holder felt goosebumps prickle along her arms. She couldn't name it, but something about that posture reminded her of horses that sense a foal in danger, the way they home in on distress. Security tried to track his exit. In one grainy shot, he was seen trotting briskly through the front entrance, head high. Then he vanished off camera, presumably into the parking lot or beyond. The guards had found no sign of hoofprints outside, likely because the ground was too frozen. Dr. Holder, feeling both unsettled and intrigued, resolved to keep trying. If the stallion existed in flesh and blood, and she believed he did, someone must have witnessed his journey away from the hospital. Later that evening, the mother and father attempted to eat a meal in the cafeteria. Taste was irrelevant to them, but they forced down bland sandwiches for the energy needed to endure the next wave of tests and updates. Hospital staff greeted them with whispers of encouragement. 2 floors below, a cluster of reporters remained near the entrance, though smaller than before. The initial media frenzy had receded slightly, yet rumors of sightings drifted in from all corners. A driver claimed they saw a horse crossing a freeway overpass. A local woman believed she glimpsed one grazing near a closed-down amusement park. None were confirmed. When the parents returned to Lily's room, they found a new nurse checking her vitals. This nurse wore a bright smile and moved efficiently, explaining that the day shift had changed. Lily stirred slightly, letting out the faintest whimper. Her mother bent over her, whispering lullabies, while the father tenderly placed a stuffed teddy bear by her pillow. He realized with a lump in his throat that Lily had never truly been awake to experience these gifts they'd brought. But maybe, with luck, she soon would. Night came gently. Lights dimmed, visitors dispersed, and the hospital settled into a quiet hum. The father walked to the window, peering out at the glow of street lamps. He tried to imagine the stallion's shape trotting through the darkness, guided by some cosmic knowledge that humans couldn't perceive. He half smiled at the fanciful notion. As a rational man, he had never believed in anything beyond what the senses could confirm. Yet here he was, daydreaming about a phantom horse that had breathed life into his daughter's failing lungs. The mother dozed on the couch, and Lily rested soundly, her monitors beeping in consistent time. The father decided to take a short walk to clear his head, slipping into the hallway where the same 2 guards from the previous night still hovered to protect the ward. They acknowledged him with nods. Downstairs, the lobby was mostly empty, save for a lone receptionist fighting off sleep. Through the glass doors, he saw the distant silhouette of a news van, headlights off but parked resolutely as though waiting for a final scoop. He stepped out into the cold. His breath formed a small cloud in front of his face, and the sense of solitude washed over him. The memory of the horse's gentle touch against his hand returned, vivid and comforting. He realized he'd been gripping Lily's knitted hat in his pocket, and he withdrew it, stroking its soft fibers. Under the glow of a dim street lamp, he whispered, "Thank you." The words weren't aimed at anyone in particular, or perhaps they were aimed at the night sky, at the hospital windows behind him, or at the memory of that silent stallion. His quiet moment ended when the glass doors whirred open behind him, and a nurse peeked out to let him know Lily's mother was awake and calling for him. Stuffing the tiny hat back into his pocket, he gave a final glance at the sleeping city. Then he stepped inside, returning to the place where love and fear intertwined around the slender thread of Lily's survival. He had no idea what the new dawn would bring, but he walked forward with a steadiness born of renewed faith. Tomorrow was another day, and for the first time in many weeks, he could face it without feeling the crushing weight of finality. When morning light found its way into room 312 once again, Lily was stirring more than usual. Her eyelids fluttered, and she made a faint sound that the mother, hovering at the bedside, interpreted as the start of a newborn cry. While the mother reached down to soothe her, she felt a trembling sense of awe. Just days ago, she had been preparing to say goodbye forever. Now, that fragile cry was the most beautiful sound she could have imagined. The father, standing nearby, wiped his eyes as he whispered words of encouragement to Lily, urging her to keep fighting. Dr. Allam, ever punctual, arrived at 6:30. After checking Lily's latest oxygen levels, he affirmed that if this trend continued, they could begin lowering ventilator settings within the next 24 hours. It felt like standing on the edge of a new world, hopeful but uncertain, brimming with possibilities. Outside the hospital, the media presence was slowly thinning. A few vans remained, their reporters hoping for the next chapter in the miraculous recovery that had become front-page news across the county. Yet the hospital staff had grown adept at deflecting questions. They politely reiterated that Lily's condition was private and that the family requested space. When Lily's father took a brief walk in the hallway, he caught sight of a camera crew filming near the elevator. He recognized one of the reporters, a tall woman with curly hair who had spoken to him after the stallion's appearance. She gave him a small nod as he passed, but he kept his gaze fixed forward, determined to avoid another interview. Perhaps, he mused, it was unfair to remain silent when so many prayed for Lily and found hope in her story. But he didn't know how to explain an event that defied explanation. Meanwhile, Dr. Holder doubled down on her search efforts. She made inquiries at remote farms and even posted flyers around the nearby countryside, describing the horse in meticulous detail. Most people who called her line were simply curious or seeking attention. A few tried to convince her they had indeed seen the same stallion, but when pressed, they admitted it was a different color or showed no scars. Undeterred, she pressed on. Her colleagues teased her gently for her obsession, but Dr. Holder felt a tug in her heart. She believed that if this horse had altered one life so profoundly, there might be others in need. Even if she could never prove how or why the horse influenced Lily's recovery, it seemed irresponsible to ignore the possibility that he might appear again, somewhere else. Back upstairs, the staff in pediatric care prepared for Lily's next big test. A short trial of reduced ventilator support. The mother, tense but resolute, stood beside Lily's bed and watched two nurses carefully adjust the settings. The father waited near the foot of the bed, hands twisting together. Dr. Allam monitored the readings closely, ready to revert to full support if Lily showed any sign of distress. For a moment, the baby's breathing hitched, and the father felt panic rising in his throat. Then Lily exhaled, her tiny chest lifting and falling with more natural rhythm than either parent had ever witnessed. An hour passed, then two, with Lily maintaining stable vitals. At last, Dr. Allam permitted a few more hours of this trial. If Lily continued to do well, they'd keep going. An undercurrent of excitement rippled through the room. The mother pressed her lips to Lily's forehead, tears leaving silent trails down her cheeks. Over lunch, the father found himself cornered by a kindly nurse in the cafeteria. She asked if he might speak with another family whose infant was in critical condition. They yearned for reassurance and had heard rumors of Lily's extraordinary progress. The father hesitated, feeling unqualified to offer guidance, but the nurse's eyes pleaded on the other family's behalf. Reluctantly, he agreed. A short while later, he slipped into a small consultation room where he met a couple whose baby girl had been diagnosed with a rare disorder. Both parents looked pale and scared. They stumbled over their words until the father placed a gentle hand on the mother's arm. "I'm not a doctor," he said quietly, "but I understand how it feels when you think there's no hope left." He shared a simplified version of his experiences from the last few days. The despair, the sudden horse appearance, Lily's abrupt turnaround. He admitted he couldn't explain it. He confessed that some nights he still paced the corridors, half convinced the miracle might vanish if he blinked too long. When he finished, the other mother was crying softly, and her husband cradled her close. They both thanked him for speaking so openly. Though there was no promise of a miraculous horse returning, his testimony of Lily's resilience seemed to ease their burden, if only by a fraction. The father left that room feeling equal parts vulnerable and uplifted, as if by sharing his story, he'd somehow strengthened his own resolve. Later, as the hospital's daily rhythms carried on, nurses administering medications, doctors making rounds, visitors bustling in and out, Lily's mother found herself at the window. She gazed out over the cityscape, recalling every detail of that morning the horse arrived. The hush of the hallway, the stunned look on the staff's faces, the stallion's calm, unhurried stance. She remembered pressing her hand against his muzzle, feeling the warmth of his breath. The memory brought a lump to her throat. If Lily's improvement continued, would anyone still believe the horse had played a role? Or would they chalk it up to a fluke, a timing coincidence that the parents latched onto in their desperation? As though sensing her somber thoughts, Lily stirred in her bassinet, a gentle whimper that reminded the mother that her daughter was still here. It was enough to chase away doubts, for now. That evening, Dr. Holder appeared on the pediatric floor, her jacket dusted with bits of hay after visiting some local stables. She brought Lily a small plush horse as a gift, placing it on a chair in the corner of the room. With genuine warmth, she greeted the parents and checked on Lily, though she was not part of the medical team. The father noticed circles under Dr. Holder's eyes, a testament to her tireless search. He asked if she had turned up anything new. She shook her head, managing a half smile. "I did find someone who claims to have seen a dark horse near the old train station, but the timing doesn't match." "Still, I'm not giving up." The father couldn't help but be grateful for her dedication, even though it seemed a long shot that the stallion would return. They spoke in low tones while Lily dozed, discussing theories that ranged from the horse belonging to a traveling show to the more fanciful suggestions that it was some kind of guardian spirit. Eventually, Dr. Holder excused herself, promising to stay in touch. The mother felt a pang as she left, wondering if Dr. Holder's search might never find closure. Nightfall brought a new hush to room 312, lit by the soft glow of monitors and a single lamp in the corner. The father retrieved Lily's mother a cup of tea from the common area, then returned to find Dr. Alem quietly entering. "She's responding well," he murmured, checking Lily's vitals. "I think tomorrow we can attempt a longer period off the ventilator." He glanced at the parents, noting their hopeful expressions. "One day at a time," he reminded them. Then he departed, leaving the mother and father alone with their thoughts. The father sank into a chair beside Lily's bed, exhaustion settling into his bones. The mother finished her tea and placed the empty cup on a rolling tray. They listened to Lily's soft breathing, each lost in a swirl of gratitude and disbelief. At last, the mother spoke in a trembling whisper. "You know, part of me wonders if we'll ever see that horse again, and another part of me is terrified of what might happen if we don't." The father reached over, taking her hand in his. He came when she needed him most. Maybe that was all he was meant to do. He paused, swallowing hard. "But if the world is kind, maybe we'll get to thank him somehow." Outside the window, the winter sky remained a deep sapphire hue, with a few scattered stars twinkling faintly. The hospital corridors were quiet, except for a distant beep and the hushed drone of ventilation systems. Midnight approached with little fanfare, marking another day survived. The mother lay down on the couch, pulling a thin blanket over her shoulders, while the father propped himself against the wall in a lopsided attempt at comfort. A gentle hush enclosed them, the soft machinery noises almost soothing now that danger seemed to have receded. Lily, in her small bed, made a tiny sigh and shifted slightly. Neither parent spoke for a long time, content to watch the miracle of each breath. And so they waited, hearts brimming with cautious hope. In the background of their minds, the memory of hooves clacking on sterile floors lingered like a beautiful and impossible dream. Perhaps the stallion had returned to whatever secret realm he called home. Perhaps he roamed the night in search of other children who needed a second chance. They had no answers, only the lingering reverence for a moment that had changed their lives. And if dawn came without him reappearing, at least they still had Lily, breathing softly, forging a future they once believed was lost. Morning arrived with a slight dusting of snow on the hospital grounds. Tiny flakes swirled outside Lily's window, illuminated by the first hints of sunlight. In room 312, Lily's parents awoke to a flurry of activity. Nurses were busy prepping for the next phase of Lily's ventilator reduction, a bigger step than the short trials she'd been doing. The mother rubbed sleep from her eyes, her pulse quickening with both apprehension and anticipation. She glanced at Lily, noticing the rise and fall of the baby's chest, which had grown steadier in the past day. Her heart twisted with gratitude. Dr. Alam entered soon after, his expression unreadable but not unkind. "Today's a milestone," he said, scanning the monitors that surrounded Lily. "We'll begin slowly reducing the ventilator support and see how she tolerates it. Keep in mind there might be setbacks. It's not always a straight line upward." Both parents nodded, fully aware that hope walked a razor's edge. At his signal, two nurses adjusted dials and pressed buttons with meticulous care. Alarms were silenced, replaced by hushed beeps of shifting pressures. Outside, the hospital world continued its usual rhythm, orderlies moving stretchers, doctors conferring, visitors waiting in lobby chairs. But here in room 312, time seemed to condense into each breath Lily managed on her own. They waited. The mother sat perched on the edge of her seat, the father just behind her, hands on her shoulders. For a heartbeat or two, Lily's breathing went ragged, and a nurse hovered over the controls, ready to intervene. Then Lily relaxed, exhaling a soft coo. The monitors didn't spike, her oxygen saturation held. Relief flooded the room, and a collective breath escaped everyone. "Let's keep monitoring," Dr. Alam said quietly, a trace of a smile tugging at his lips. "If she keeps this up, we'll continue to scale back." A few floors below, Dr. Holder stepped into the main lobby with her coat zipped to her chin. She carried a sheaf of papers in one hand, evidence of yet more calls and inquiries about the horse. At the reception desk, she hesitated, torn between checking on Lily and pursuing her own leads. After a moment, she placed the papers under one arm and headed toward the pediatric wing. Even if she had no breakthrough to share, she wanted to see how Lily fared. On the elevator, she rehearsed phrases in her mind, gentle ways to keep the family updated on her fruitless search without discouraging them. But the moment she stepped off on Lily's floor, she felt a different energy permeating the hallway. Nurses walked faster, eyes bright with expectancy. Something significant was unfolding, and Dr. Holder sensed it before anyone spoke. When she reached room 312, she found Lily's parents standing by the bed, the mother's eyes shining. Lily was off most of her ventilator support, her breathing supplemented only by a small cannula delivering extra oxygen. No more bulky tubes obscured her delicate face. Dr. Holder let out a quiet gasp. "Oh my goodness," she breathed, stepping closer, her veterinarian's instincts temporarily overshadowed by pure awe. She looked so much more comfortable. Tears sparked in the father's eyes as he nodded. "She's been holding her own for half an hour now." They exchanged relieved grins, though no one dared say too much, as if speaking the word miracle outright might break the fragile spell. "Doctor." And Liam, watching from a corner, scribbled notes in Lily's chart, his expression that of a man whose scientific mind was tested by events that didn't align neatly with known theories. A soft knock at the door drew their attention. A nurse poked her head in. "There's someone in the waiting area," she whispered, clearly excited. "He wants to speak with you. Says he has information about the horse." Dr. Holder's eyes widened. She glanced at Lily's parents, who shared a look of mingled curiosity and hesitation. Though Lily's progress mattered above all, the stallion's name still fluttered in the background of their thoughts. The mother told the father, "Go see, I'm all right here." Her voice held a mixture of nerves and encouragement. He gave a final glance at Lily, her tiny nose now free from bulky equipment, before slipping out, Dr. Holder trailing in his wake. They made their way down the corridor to the small waiting lounge. Seated on a worn sofa was a lanky man in his 40s, wearing a faded barn coat. His hat was pushed back, revealing a weathered face. When he saw the father and Dr. Holder approach, he stood up, rubbing his hands together as though uncertain how to begin. "Afternoon," he said quietly, dipping his head in a nervous sort of greeting. "I heard you might be looking for a horse." "A special one?" The father nodded, heart thudding. Dr. Holder stepped forward. "Yes, we've been searching for the owner of a dark bay stallion that came here. He had scars, old ones. He appeared out of nowhere." She paused, studying the man's expression. "Do you know something about him?" The man swallowed, fiddling with his hat. "Not sure I'm his owner exactly," he said in a voice tinged with regret, "but I knew a horse that fits that description. Name was Bramble, though I haven't seen him in ages." He hesitated, eyes darting to the father, then back to Dr. Holder. "He used to roam on my family's land, but after my pa died, I couldn't keep the stables running. Bramble disappeared one day. I thought he was gone for good." Dr. Holder's pulse quickened. "Can you describe him more? You mentioned scars." The man nodded again, brow creasing. "He had marks on his flank, looked like from a barbed wire fence, and one scar near the shoulder, an odd, jagged shape. Most folks thought he was too wild to tame. My pa tried to befriend him, said Bramble was special, like he sensed things no normal horse could. But after pa passed, I lost track of him. I've been hearing rumors of a horse turning up in strange places, couldn't ignore it." The father felt an odd chill ripple through him. "So you think this is the same horse?" he murmured, trying to keep his voice steady. "Could he have come here because he recognized someone, or wanted to help?" He cringed at how ridiculous the question sounded. But the man's gaze did not waver. "If it's him, I wouldn't be surprised," he said simply. "My pa once found him nudging a wounded coyote pup, as if urging someone to help. Another time, a rancher swore Bramble helped guide a lost calf home. Folks said it was nonsense, but I saw enough to wonder if there wasn't something else at work." His cheeks flushed, as though admitting a belief that was too mystical for everyday life. Dr. Holder leaned forward, her scientific reservations momentarily submerged by her fascination. "Do you know where we might find him now?" she asked, unable to hide the urgency in her tone. The man shrugged, an apologetic tilt to his shoulders. "No clue. He comes and goes. People see him at dawn by a creek or in moonlight by an old barn. When I heard about the hospital story, I guessed maybe Bramble's still doing what he always did, looking for souls in need. So I came here, thinking maybe you'd know how to track him." Silence fell between them. The father's throat felt tight with emotion. Could it be true that the horse had some inexplicable instinct for helping the vulnerable? He didn't fully believe in folk tales, yet Lily's metamorphosis defied all logic. Dr. Holder gently cleared her throat. "If we wanted to find him," she asked, "where might we even start?" The man glanced down at his hat, turning it in his hands. "There's a stretch of open land east of town, near a dried-up riverbed. That's where my pa first saw him years ago. Maybe try around there. But Bramble's got a mind of his own. No one can force him to show up." The father exchanged a look with Dr. Holder, then he extended a hand. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick. "I'm not sure we'll actually go searching right now. My daughter is still in the hospital, but I appreciate you coming." The man shook his hand, sincerity etched across his features. "I hope your little girl pulls through," he said softly. "If Bramble was the one who came, then maybe she's already got luck on her side." They parted ways with subdued gratitude, the man trudging off down the corridor. Dr. Holder jotted down the details he'd given, her mind awhirl with the possibility of Bramble existing beyond rumor. The father, feeling a surge of yearning for answers, nonetheless hurried back toward Lily's room. His daughter needed him more than any mystery ever could. When he entered, Lily's mother smiled tearfully, gesturing for him to come see their baby's face, now more visible without the tubes. With a shaky breath, he approached the bed, heart swelling at the sight. Lily's tiny eyes flickered open, just a fraction, but he could have sworn she was peering at him. All thoughts of the horse faded as he reached for Lily's hand. That fragile grip around his fingertip was everything, hope made tangible. In that moment, he realized that while he might one day chase the enigma of the stallion named Bramble, right now his entire world was here, in this room, in the soft inhale and exhale of his child. Perhaps that was precisely what the horse had taught him, that miracles can touch down in the worst storms, and sometimes all you can do is trust the light they leave behind. A hush settled in the corridor outside room 312, broken only by the soft shuffle of slippers and the hum of overhead lights. Word of Lily's sustained improvement spread among the pediatric staff, and whenever doctors convened at the nurses' station, their discussions bristled with terms like miraculous, though they tempered their awe with caution. Each breath Lily managed without the ventilator felt like a gift, and her parents found themselves torn between euphoria and the persistent shadow of doubt. They knew too well how fragile life could be. Yet every time Lily's tiny eyelids fluttered or her fingers curled around an offered finger, the father felt a surge of gratitude. In the midst of that precarious hope, the story of the horse lingered quietly, a half-remembered dream. That afternoon, after Lily completed several hours of minimal ventilator support, Dr. Allam approved another reduction. This time, the doctor suggested it might be a milestone toward fully removing the apparatus if Lily tolerated it overnight. Her mother, heart-pounding, carefully helped a nurse reposition Lily, ensuring the cannula stayed secured. The father, meanwhile, hovered near the door, anxious for any sign of distress. When the nurse stepped back, Lily's vitals remained steady, the soft beep of the monitor a gentle metronome in the hushed space. For an instant, the father recalled the day the stallion had arrived, how he'd braced himself for heartbreak, only to be offered the faintest thread of hope. Now that hope felt real enough to touch, as tangible as Lily's slight but determined breaths. Downstairs, Dr. Holder studied the old photograph the rancher had given her during their conversation in the waiting area. The image showed a younger version of the man's father, standing beside a dark bay horse with a proud stance. Faint scars were visible along the horse's flank, confirming many of her suspicions. Bramble, if indeed he was the same stallion that had appeared at the hospital, seemed to have roamed freely for years. Yet why he'd chosen that particular day, that particular room, gnawed at her. No rational explanation satisfied her curiosity. She tapped her pen against her notebook, scrawling reminders to check the dried riverbed site the rancher had mentioned. Before stepping outside for air, she glanced up at the ceiling, wondering if Lily was still forging her impossible comeback. Outside, gusts of wind scattered brittle leaves across the parking lot, the final remnants of autumn resisting winter's icy grip. Dr. Holder zipped her coat and walked around the building's perimeter. In the distance, beyond a chain-link fence, she spotted rolling fields dusted with a thin layer of snow. She tried to imagine Bramble's silhouette against the horizon, that same purposeful gait that had carried him through the hospital doors. Her breath plumed in the cold air as she turned back, noticing a small group of reporters camped near the main entrance. They perked up upon seeing someone exit, but Dr. Holder kept walking, not in the mood for questions. Overhead, a grey sky pressed down with an expectant heaviness, as though another chapter in this surreal story was yet to unfold. Returning to the pediatric ward, Dr. Holder found Lily's father stepping into the hallway. His face was lined with both exhaustion and relief. "She's doing better," he said softly, offering a tired smile. Dr. Holder asked if she could peek in, and he nodded. Inside, Lily's mother stood by the bed, gently stroking the baby's head. The nurse on duty pointed out that Lily's oxygen saturation remained stable, a feat none had predicted a week prior. Dr. Holder slipped closer, marveling at Lily's pinker cheeks and calmer breathing. Though she was just a veterinarian, the resonance of that moment stirred something deep within her, a reminder that across all species, life clings to hope in ways no one fully understands. She whispered a soft hello to Lily, who moved her tiny fingers in reply. The father cleared his throat. "Earlier, a man came by. He believed the horse was named Bramble, that he'd known him years ago. Did you speak with him, Doctor?" Holder nodded, explaining the photo she'd seen. "I'm trying to piece it together," she added. "He mentioned a creek east of town. I might go check it out tomorrow." The mother listened intently, but said little, too fixated on Lily to entertain the mystery of the stallion for long. Still, the father appeared torn, as if part of him longed to chase any lead about the horse, while another part refused to leave Lily's side. "Doctor," Holder said gently, "you belong here. Don't worry about searching. If I find anything concrete, you'll be the first to know." He nodded, relief and regret mingling in his eyes. Night fell softly, casting subdued reflections on the corridor's polished floor. Lily's condition held steady, though Dr. Allam cautioned that the real test would come in the early hours, when her body's rhythms changed. The mother prepared to spend another sleepless vigil, but the father persuaded her to rest on the small couch. Alone by Lily's bedside, the father found himself reliving the moment the stallion had halted outside the door, that gentle exhalation that seemed to breathe new life into Lily's fragile lungs. He stroked her tiny hand, murmuring, "You're so strong, sweetheart. Stronger than any of us." Outside, the wind sighed, rattling the window pane, as though the night itself offered a lullaby. For the first time, the father allowed himself a tentative vision of taking Lily home someday. Not far away, Dr. Holder pored over local maps in a corner of the hospital library, lit by a single fluorescent lamp. She traced the route east of town, circling places where a wild horse might find water or shelter. The rancher's story about Bramble kept replaying in her mind. The horse nudging a wounded pup, guiding a lost calf, and now, perhaps, saving a fragile infant. She wondered if Lily's miraculous turnaround was just a fortuitous coincidence, or if some deeper force guided Bramble's actions. Glancing at the clock, she realized it was near midnight. Tomorrow, she would gather supplies and head for that dried riverbed, determined to follow any trail Bramble might have left behind. With a final note in her planner, she closed the map and headed for home. Meanwhile, the hospital settled into its nocturnal hush. Rows of lights dimmed, leaving only the faint glow of exit signs. In Lily's room, the mother dozed uneasily, while the father remained awake, lulled by the gentle beep of monitors and the swirl of half-formed prayers. Around 3 in the morning, Lily stirred, releasing a soft cry. The father's heart leapt as he reached for her, alerting a nurse who rushed in with a comforting hand. Although Lily's whimper was weak, it signaled something vital. She was increasingly aware, her body demanding attention like any newborn. Once the nurse adjusted her position, Lily calmed, and her father exhaled slowly. She was still fighting, breath by breath, and for the first time, he felt that perhaps the future was unfolding in their favor. The hours stretched toward dawn, and in that fragile space between night and morning, the hospital awoke with quiet purpose. Nurses changed shifts, doctors consulted early charts, and the father kept vigil at Lily's side. At last, sunlight filtered through the window, revealing Lily's stable stats. With every rise and fall of her chest, the father felt his faith deepen. Outside, the world remained poised, waiting for another glimpse of the legendary stallion. But for now, Bramble remained elusive, haunting the edges of possibility. No matter what the truth behind his appearance might be, Lily's parents were convinced that his arrival was no coincidence. They had witnessed a moment where despair dissolved into hope. And in that fleeting space, their daughter had begun her journey back to life. The day began with a renewed sense of anticipation on the pediatric floor, as though the hospital itself held its breath. Lily had surpassed every dire forecast so far, and her medical team planned to continue weaning her from the ventilator. The father woke to the sound of hushed conversation in the hallway, doctors and nurses murmuring about Lily's progress, their voices tinged with both amazement and professional caution. He sat up, rubbing stiff shoulders, only to find Lily's mother already by the bassinet, tenderly adjusting the oxygen cannula that now replaced the bulkier apparatus. Outside, the sky shimmered with a hint of gold, a winter sunrise that seemed to promise yet another day of hope. Dr. Alam arrived before 7, flipping calmly through Lily's chart as though searching for an anomaly. But every piece of data confirmed what he and the team had witnessed. Lily's lungs were growing stronger, her vital signs increasingly stable. With measured optimism, he explained that if she maintained these improvements, they could remove the last of the ventilator support by evening. A week ago, such a plan would have been inconceivable. The mother teared up quietly, her heart racing at the possibility that she might soon hold Lily without the tangle of tubes. Meanwhile, the father closed his eyes, silently thanking whatever providence had intervened, human, equine, or otherwise. Not long afterward, Dr. Holder appeared, coat unzipped and hair disheveled from the brisk morning wind. She greeted Lily's parents with a small smile. Though she was a veterinarian with no official role in Lily's treatment, the staff had grown used to her presence, sensing she was an ally in this unfolding mystery. "I'm heading out soon to that dried riverbed," she said softly, touching the father's arm. "Wanted to see Lily first, in case I find any sign of him." The father nodded, glancing at his daughter's peaceful form. "Thank you," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "If you see him, maybe just tell him we're forever in his debt," Dr. Holder gave a rueful half-smile, knowing how impossible that conversation sounded, yet determined to try. By midday, Lily was breathing almost entirely on her own, buoyed by the faintest stream of supplemental oxygen. Nurses documented each hour's readings with giddy astonishment. Though Dr. Allam reminded everyone of possible setbacks, a celebratory mood pervaded the ward. Even staff, with no direct involvement, gravitated to room 312, sneaking glances at the once fading infant now blossoming into awareness. The father found himself fielding cautious congratulations in the hallway, while the mother carefully helped a nurse bathe Lily for the first time without major respiratory equipment. She wanted to laugh and cry at once, thrilled by each ordinary milestone that had once seemed out of reach. That same afternoon, Dr. Holder left the hospital with a purposeful stride, driving east toward the place the rancher had described. The journey took her down winding roads and past frost-capped fields. She replayed the man's words in her head. Bramble was a loner, appearing and disappearing like a ghost, scars marking a past no one fully knew. Yet Dr. Holder clung to the hope that somewhere between the quiet farmland and the forgotten creek, she might stumble onto fresh hoofprints. If her search proved fruitless, she would at least know she'd tried. Sometimes, in the face of the inexplicable, the attempt itself became a kind of devotion. As the highway turned into a bumpy dirt lane, Dr. Holder braked near a weathered sign reading Riverbend 1 mile. From there, she proceeded on foot, scanning the ground for any sign of recent equine activity. The faint crunch of snow under her boots punctuated the otherwise silent landscape. She passed stands of leafless trees whose branches spidered across the sky, half expecting Bramble to emerge from behind one of them, muzzle extended in cautious greeting. Instead, she found only wind-blown footprints and the distant call of crows. She pressed on, the cold air stinging her cheeks and numbing her fingers. When she finally reached the dry riverbed, the banks dropped into a shallow, rocky trough. Decaying leaves collected in clumps, and water trickled in narrow patches of ice. She moved slowly, scanning for hoof marks. To her surprise, she discovered a single trail of indentations in the soft earth near the bank. Heart pounding, she crouched closer. The prints looked fresh, pressed firmly enough to suggest a large, unshod horse. They led upstream, curving behind a thicket. Dr. Holder followed them with measured steps, adrenaline coursing through her veins, barely breathing for fear of scaring away the stallion if he was near. A bend in the creek revealed a small clearing, its floor blanketed with frost. Beyond that, the hoofprints vanished into rockier ground. Dr. Holder circled the area, searching for any clue that might confirm Bramble's presence. Stray hairs on a branch, a fresh patch of disturbed snow. She found nothing definitive, only the faint, lingering sense that a living creature had paused here recently. The silence pressed around her, heavy and profound. After another hour, her breath ragged and toes numb, she realized the trail had gone cold. Swallowing her disappointment, she whispered into the chilled air, "If you're out there, this family still needs you to know their gratitude." It sounded naive, even to her own ears, but she spoke the words anyway. Back at the hospital, Lily's final ventilator line was carefully removed just before dusk. The mother hovered, tears brimming, as the nurse disconnected the machine and secured a simple nasal cannula. Lily squirmed a little, adjusting to the shift, but made no cry. The father stood rooted, hardly daring to blink. Monitors beeped steadily, showing Lily's oxygen levels and heart rate remaining in a safe range. Then Dr. Allam smiled for the first time in days, a genuine, unguarded expression of satisfaction. "She's doing it on her own," he murmured, nodding to Lily's parents. "I think you may finally be able to hold her freely tonight." The mother buried her face in the father's chest, sobbing with relief. That evening, nurses assisted in settling Lily into the mother's arms for the first extended skin-to-skin contact. The mother trembled at the sensation of Lily's warmth against her own. The father watched, his eyes filling with tears as he witnessed a moment they had feared would never come. Softly, he crouched beside them, gently placing a hand on Lily's head. Their baby's eyes fluttered open in the dim light, meeting her parents' gazes. The father felt his chest tighten with a love so fierce it bordered on pain. In that intimate exchange, the ward outside seemed to dissolve, leaving only the three of them in a universe forged by hope. Dr. Holder returned after dark, exhausted and half-frozen from her trek. She trudged through the hospital doors, ignoring the few straggling reporters who lifted cameras in her direction. Once upstairs, she approached room 312, her disappointment dissolving the moment she saw Lily resting peacefully on her mother's chest, free of the ventilator. The father looked up and beckoned her closer. Quietly, "Doctor." Holder entered, tears forming at the corners of her eyes as she took in the scene. It no longer mattered that her search had led nowhere specific. The real miracle had already transpired. Later that night, Lily's parents dozed in gentle shifts, ensuring one of them was always near. The father again found himself awake in the early hours, the corridor outside silent except for the low buzz of fluorescent lights. He tiptoed to the window, gazing out at a moonlit parking lot. A stray cat slunk across the asphalt, but there was no sign of any larger creature. The father's breath fogged the glass. In his pocket, he still carried the makeshift gauze halter, a small relic of that extraordinary day. Clutching it, he sent a silent wish into the night, that Bramble was safe, wherever he was, and that he might somehow sense their gratitude. Morning light returned with the same gentle promise, flooding room 312 to reveal Lily stirring again in her mother's arms, unencumbered by machinery. Nurses entered with fresh linens, remarking on how wonderful it was to see Lily breathe so strongly. Dr. Allam, scanning the monitors, nodded with restrained but unmistakable joy. "We'll keep a close watch for any regression," he cautioned. "But if she maintains this for 48 hours, we can talk about the next steps toward eventual discharge." His words sounded surreal. For so long, Lily's parents had lived in a state of near-constant fear. Now, the notion of leaving the hospital with their daughter was almost too large to comprehend. After the staff left, the mother rocked Lily gently, tears slipping down her cheeks. "My sweet girl," she whispered, "you have no idea how close we came to losing you." The father joined them, pressing a gentle kiss on Lily's forehead. Over her head, he caught the mother's gaze. They both remembered the moment Lily's fate had nearly been sealed, the final paperwork, the unstoppable grief, and how a sudden interruption of hoofbeats had shattered that fate like glass. Words felt inadequate, but their eyes shared the same silent wonder. Perhaps angels wore many forms, including that of a scarred horse named Bramble. By the next morning, Lily's hospital room felt like a place caught between a miracle and the ordinary business of healing. Machines still stood nearby, ready for any emergency, but they remained mostly silent. Nurses drifted in to check vitals and offer gentle smiles, amazed by Lily's robust progress. The mother and father took turns holding their infant, awed by how her frail body had sprung back from the brink. Whenever Lily opened her eyes, they felt a rush of joyful disbelief. She was still delicate, her limbs thin, her lungs not yet fully strong, but she was there, alive in their arms. News of Lily's improvement spread through the hospital like a soothing breeze. Staff who had worried and prayed for her stopped by room 312 to marvel at the tiny bundle, now free from elaborate life support. Even the jaded among them, the ones who insisted every outcome had a logical explanation, admitted that Lily's turnaround seemed to defy every dire prediction. Some whispered about the horse, while others avoided the subject, perhaps unwilling to ascribe medical success to anything but skill and timing. Yet a sense of quiet wonder persisted, as though the hospital walls themselves remembered the rhythm of hooves and the hush that followed. Early that afternoon, Dr. Allam convened a meeting with Lily's parents. They gathered in a small consultation room adjacent to the Ward E, away from the flow of visitors. The silver-haired pediatrician who had overseen Lily's case from the start was also present, along with two nurses who had cared for Lily during her most critical hours. The mother and father exchanged nervous glances, recalling past meetings when every word stung with finality. This time, though, the atmosphere bristled with cautious optimism. "We want to talk about Lily's discharge plan," Dr. Allam began, folding his hands on the table. "Not immediately, of course. We'll keep her for observation and further tests. But if her condition remains stable for the next week or two, there's no reason to keep her hospitalized longer than necessary. She's doing remarkably well." The father released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The mother's eyes welled with tears. For so long they had dreamed of the day they might hear such words, yet never dared imagine them spoken so soon. The pediatrician chimed in, outlining the need for continued checkups, respiratory therapy, and potential follow-up surgeries if her lungs showed any developmental issues down the road. "We'll ease into this carefully," he added, "but the key takeaway is that your daughter has a viable path forward." At that, the mother covered her mouth, tears slipping down. The father placed a hand on her back. Their minds flooded with images of Lily at home. Her own crib, her own blankets, soft sunlight through the nursery window. It felt like they were on the brink of stepping into a life they once believed impossible. They returned to Lily's room afterward, still processing the news. The mother scooped Lily up, smiling through her tears as the baby squirmed, wrinkling her nose. The father stroked Lily's downy hair, a reverent hush in his voice. "Or we'll take you home soon," he murmured. "You'll see." Outside the window, bright winter sunshine danced off the freshly fallen snow, as though the world itself was celebrating. Across town, Dr. Holder parked her car at a modest diner, cheeks flushed from the cold. She'd visited the dried riverbed twice more over the past 2 days, finding traces that might belong to a wandering horse, hoofprints leading nowhere, strands of dark hair snagged on brambles. But Bramble himself remained elusive. Sipping a cup of hot coffee, Dr. Holder gazed at the photograph the rancher had provided. The man's father stood in the yellowed snapshot, leaning against the bay stallion's shoulder with an expression of trust. She traced the edges of the photo with her fingertip, wondering if she should keep searching, or if Bramble's role in Lily's story had simply reached its natural end. As she pondered, her phone buzzed with a text from the hospital. Lily's father had just sent an update. Lily was breathing on her own, and the doctors discussed the possibility of discharge in a couple of weeks. Dr. Holder's heart lifted at the news. Whatever Bramble's origins, Lily's rescue was a reality. Perhaps that was all that truly mattered. She finished her coffee, deciding she would continue looking for Bramble a bit longer. She felt compelled to at least attempt a proper goodbye on behalf of Lily's family. But if he truly was a wandering spirit, no amount of searching might suffice. Meanwhile, word of Lily's imminent release reached the local news outlets, sparking renewed interest. Reporters who had previously dwindled in number trickled back to the hospital lobby, hoping for a statement from the parents. This time, the mother and father agreed to a brief, carefully managed appearance, partly to thank the community for its outpouring of support. They spoke quietly to a small gathering of press in one of the hospital conference rooms. The mother cradled Lily throughout, her face etched with both relief and lingering exhaustion. A reporter asked, "Do you believe the horse was responsible for your daughter's recovery?" The mother hesitated, glancing at her husband. He answered softly, "We don't claim to understand everything that happened, but we know Lily started improving right after he arrived. We're simply grateful for the doctors, for the hospital staff, for everyone who prayed for us, and yes, for the horse that somehow intervened." Cameras flashed, capturing the tears glistening in the mother's eyes. Another reporter pressed for more details, but the father shook his head, gently declining to speculate further. They wanted to maintain some privacy, to let Lily's story remain filled with wonder rather than debate. That evening brought another quiet hush to the hospital room. Lily dozed in her mother's arms, the father seated nearby, elbows resting on the edge of the bed. "She's so small," he whispered, brushing a fingertip across Lily's cheek. "But she's strong," the mother replied, smiling. A quick series of beeps came from the monitor, just an alert that Lily had kicked off a sensor. The father adjusted it, then settled back. Outside, staff changed shifts, and the corridor lights dimmed as the night grew older. The parents couldn't help reflecting on how drastically their life had changed since the stallion trotted through the hospital doors. That day now felt like a legend, told and retold in half-astonished whispers by nurses and visitors. Some insisted it was a one-in-a-million fluke. Others liked to say they'd witnessed a true miracle. As for Lily's parents, they knew only that in their darkest moment, a gentle muzzle had nudged them back from despair. To them, it was an act of grace too profound to label easily. With Lily cradled between them, they shared a wordless gratitude for the horse who had disappeared as mysteriously as he'd come. A week passed, each day carrying Lily farther from danger. "Doctor." Alam nodded with satisfaction at every exam, deciding she would be ready for discharge sooner than predicted. Arrangements were made with a home healthcare provider, ensuring Lily's parents would have the support they needed in those early, delicate weeks at home. The mother and father spoke in hushed, excited tones about cribs, car seats, and an uncertain but hopeful future. The father quietly visited the hospital chapel one morning, kneeling in solitude, eyes shut in a silent prayer of thanks. For the first time in his life, he found words inadequate for the depth of his gratitude. When the morning of Lily's departure finally arrived, nurses gathered at the nurses' station to bid farewell, smiles shining on their faces. Lily wore a soft pink onesie, far too large for her, but cozy enough. The mother had wrapped her in a white blanket, embroidered with tiny horse motifs, a nod to the creature who, in their eyes, had given them this chance. As they made their way to the elevator, Lily's father carried the last of their belongings, while the mother held Lily close. Staff offered waves and gentle touches, more than a few with tears in their eyes. The silver-haired pediatrician stood at the threshold, arms folded with a proud smile. "Doctor." Alam gave a respectful nod. "Take good care of her. We'll see you for follow-up soon." They rode the elevator down, hearts thumping with a mix of exhilaration and nerves. Once the doors opened, they stepped into the lobby. A few reporters looked up, cameras at the ready, but the father gently shook his head. They would not be giving any more interviews. Lily's story now belonged to the quiet sanctuary of family. Instead, they headed through the main entrance, stepping into crisp winter air. The father exhaled, feeling the cold prickle his lungs, and glanced around the parking lot. Snow glistened on car rooftops. A flock of birds soared overhead, and though no horse awaited them this time, he felt the echo of that day, the sense that something extraordinary could happen at any moment. Carefully, they placed Lily in a car seat, the mother double-checking the straps with anxious thoroughness. The father eased into the driver's seat, heart pounding. It felt surreal to buckle a seatbelt, to start the ignition, and to navigate out of the hospital's long driveway. Glancing in the rearview mirror, he saw Lily's eyes drifting shut, the mother watching her intently. As they merged onto the main road, the father let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. The hospital receded in the mirror, its structure shrinking until it was merely a shape on the horizon. In the weeks and months to come, Lily's parents would sometimes revisit that day, recalling the miraculous sequence that saved their daughter. They would talk of the horse named Bramble, who vanished into the winter air. Doctor. Holder kept them updated on her occasional findings, faint hoofprints, local sightings, but there was never a definitive reunion. Yet every now and then, Lily's father would spot a news item or overhear a rumor, a mysterious bay stallion seen helping a stranded dog, or lingering near a stalled pickup truck as though guiding passers-by. Each news story made him believe that somewhere out in the wide countryside, Bramble carried on, drawn by unspoken pleas in the hearts of those who needed help most. And in a small suburban home, tucked in a quiet neighborhood, a baby girl named Lily thrived. Her health improved with each passing day, her cheeks rounding with the bloom of life. Her mother and father never forgot how close they came to losing her, nor the muffled clop of hooves that shattered hopelessness. Perhaps they would never comprehend the full mystery of that horse, but they knew without question that miracles took many forms. Some arrived in the sterile hush of hospital corridors, others in the warmth of newborn breath. And sometimes they galloped out of the unknown, pausing just long enough to remind the world that wonder is still possible, even in its darkest hour.